So when 5G was first announced, the original purpose of it was ultra high frequency, high bandwidth type of connectivities. And so you could do things like self-driving cars, autonomous robots would need that kind of connectivity where it was super fast. What ended up happening is that they ended up dumbing down 5G quite significantly to the point where it kind of looks a lot more like LTE did. And the reason was
Amir Haleem is the CEO and co-founder of Helium.
Helium is a decentralized wireless network built by users, powered by crypto, and secured through proof of coverage.
Helium has this belief that it's the future and that it empowers individuals to create this connectivity while owning it. Do you think the incentive-based model is kind of the future?
like it's a massive undertaking for us to do what we're doing today. The challenge is how thin do you want to spread yourself to some degree, right?
Today's guest is Amir Haleem, the CEO and co-founder of Helium. Helium is one of the OG decentralized physical infrastructure networks, as we like to call it, DPINs for short. It is a decentralized wireless network through hundreds of thousands of hotspots and has recently collaborated with major carriers like AT&T and T-Mobile. I also covered Helium's funding round back in 2021, so fast forward about 4 years. I'm personally excited to get an update on all of this. Amir, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. To start off, I always like to ask our guests, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you even ended up in this space? I don't know if you consider Helium in the crypto space. I personally do, but I know you guys kind of advertise it as like a wireless network. I guess we'll get into it, but how did you get into the crypto space? And we could go from there.
I was so late into crypto, like embarrassingly late into crypto. Just in hindsight, stupidly so. But I would obviously heard about Bitcoin and to some degree Ethereum. I think our VP of business development was in the Ethereum ICO, so he was talking about Ethereum all the time. And but I never honestly paid a whole lot of attention to it. Maybe I was just so jaded from like VC fundraising, where people just use whatever buzzword they can, and like blockchain was sort of another buzzword
And then it gets
that
you
was.
a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just had sort of avoided it or thought it was all a scam or something, and never really paid any attention to it. I got into crypto really, and I think I've said this before in other places, but Filecoin was really the first time where I was like, okay, that's actually super interesting. Like they had built IPFS, this file storage protocol, and now they were building a currency-backed network, I guess, to like incentivize the use of IPFS. And it was the first time where there was like a really good team, like a strong team that actually had built products that worked. It wasn't vapor. And an idea that made total sense to me. Like you have this sort of cold start problem where you need users on your network, but you also need a network first. And so, you never knew how to start that. And I think Bitcoin was the original smart way of solving the cold start problem.
Mhm.
And then Filecoin was like an extension of it, which was more applicable to, like applications that are similar to Helium. So that was really the first time that I got into it. And then it was just a deep, dark, arguably rabbit hole after that.
And dark rabbit hole. I hope it was an enlightening rabbit hole. But
Y-
I guess,
I said, I
yeah,
could say arguably dark. It was
because, there's the dark web, there's, the
right.
old Silk Road era of crypto. So definitely different times than what's being presented out there today. In terms of Helium, though, what made you decide to create this? Like, what was kind of the gap? What were you seeing as like the problem?
Helium had been around for a while. Like we started Helium in 2013.
Hmm.
I founded it or co-founded it with Shawn from Napster,
Yes.
and we were very specifically trying to solve this problem of there should be an internet for things, right? So like now that's called the Internet of Things, obviously, but we were like there should be a way for like sensors to connect to the internet that isn't expensive, that has good battery life and stuff like that. And so we started Helium to really solve that problem, and we built this wireless protocol that was designed for sensors, and sort of muddled around honestly for a few years trying to figure out like how best to go to market with this idea, because really it only worked if you had a big wireless network somewhere, and we didn't really know how to build a big wireless network. Like we had various ideas of ways it could be distributed, but we thought the key was that it would be built by people rather than a singular company.
Right.
We just didn't really know how to incentivize that. And then, like I said, in 2017, I read the Filecoin white paper or some early draft of the Filecoin white paper, and it was like this big light bulb moment for us, and we were like, we could build a wireless network this way, perhaps, like if we could incentivize people in tokens to like start building the network before there were things that would use it. Maybe that's a way of solving the chicken egg problem, and that's kind of how that is the really earliest way of thinking about how the crypto version of Helium came to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess when I was asking, I meant the crypto version. I know Helium has been around for 12 years. So it is a lot more than just kind of maybe the deep inside of things that I see. But on the front of the existing wireless networks that are out there today, historically, as you said, it has been controlled by, our organization, an entity, let's say like Verizon or AT&T. And they're the ones who set up the cell towers. They're the ones who set the prices, everything. What is wrong with this aside from maybe the obvious? Or what is, I mean, it's been historically like right. So why shake kind of the status quo?
So you're right. I mean, the typical way that these wireless networks get built is that a company typically goes and builds the network, and they spend a bunch of money doing that, and then they charge people to use the network. And I think historically that was maybe okay. And what has happened over time is that I think a few things have happened. One is consolidation, right? Like cellular networks used to be regionally owned for the most part. Had lots of different operators in lots of different parts of the country, and they've all merged together into basically three big ones at this point, right? Which is AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. So firstly, I just sort of philosophically, I'm not sure if that's ideal, right? Like you ideally want more than like two or three vendors, providing a service if it's really going to be competitive. So that's sort of one philosophical point of view. The other, I think, is a little bit more practical, which is populations are growing and moving all the time. And cell phone usage has gone through the roof. Like there's maybe you've seen this, but in the late 90s, McKinsey did this study for AT&T. I don't know if you've heard about this, where they predicted that they didn't think there was going to be more than like 900,000 cell phones ever or something. It was some number like that, right? And so I think the point being, no one had any idea that like cell phone usage would become parabolic like this. And so that's causing problems, right? Like there are capacity problems, right? There's like too many people using the number of towers that exist. There's population growth and movement that I mentioned, like new neighborhoods appear, like new areas within neighborhoods appear. And so it's not like you just build these networks once and then they're done, like, and then it's done and like that's the network and people just use it. It is a constantly evolving and like growing beast. And that's, I think, starting to get to the breaking point of cost now, right? Where it is just too expensive and too slow for a singular entity to be able to go around and say, hey, I need, coverage in this Starbucks down the street. Like, how am I going to go do that? And that, multiply that by like millions of opportunities, and you kind of like see the problem, which is that it's very time consuming and expensive to go around building wireless networks this way, given the way that cell phone usage has kind of exploded.
Yeah. Would you compare it to the way that, you know, TV used to be like bundled and we would just buy cable and now there's like a bajillion online streaming services that we could use? I don't want to
Yeah,
compare it like that, but when you were talking about it and you're like, "Oh, there's 3, main carriers," I'm thinking, "Okay, yeah, he's right." But then I was like, "Wait, there were like very few cable
yeah.
providers and now suddenly we have so many and now I'm like, I have too many subscriptions." But I don't think it's the same.
It's not. I mean, it's similar but not the same. I mean, I think the bundling thing, by the way, is its own interesting own interesting thing. I think really to me, it's more like what Uber and Airbnb did to their industries. I think is really what it feels like, right? Where if
Right.
you wanted to operate a hotel, there's like 0% chance you were able to operate a hotel on your own, right? And
Mhm.
and Airbnb kind of created a marketplace and really the most important part, perhaps, like a discovery mechanism, right? So like you can find my house, right? That is for rent or for stay or whatever. And so it's a little bit like that, where you're sort of democratizing access to maybe critical things that people need. And like maybe Uber was one of the bigger starts of that, and then Airbnb has followed. And I think there's lots and lots of others where you've got
Mhm.
this kind of community driven way of doing it now.
Yeah, so in the decentralized ownership side of things with hotspots, how do you kind of see this as like a positive growth? And then what have been like the roadblocks along the way?
Yeah, so I think Helium got really, really big. The IoT network, which is what we're started with, I think at its peak was around 1 million hotspots, right? And the hotspots, just for like anyone who doesn't know, are sort of this wireless access point that's also connected to a crypto network. And so it got huge. Like the idea was popular. Like at the time there were no such things as DPINs. I think Helium really was one of the first, if not the first,
Mhm.
to try this idea. And so I think you get some challenge, like to sort of answer the last part of your question, there are some challenges with that, right? Like as things get really, really big in size, things get harder to manage from sort of a community point of view, not necessarily as a business, but the community gets very big. The number of issues you see are very disparate, and there's a lot to deal with there. With the mobile network, which we started building in 22, the main challenge with building mobile network compared to an IoT network is that the range of hotspots is really, really small. In an IoT network, you would stick one of these hotspots and you might create coverage for miles, which was awesome. But for cell phones, it's totally different. Like the bandwidth is very, very high and the range is very, very short, right? So you've got to be very precise about where you place them. And I think that's probably the most challenging aspect of this, is that you can no longer just buy one and stick it in your house, right? Like you really want to be sticking it in places where there's lots of foot traffic, where there's lots and lots of people. But that's also moves into sort of the really positive part of it, which is that Helium got really big from a usage point of view now, where we have over 1 million daily users, like every single day, either close to or over 1 million users touch the network somehow, like they are cell phone users that end up using Helium, usually without them even realizing it. And so that's probably the biggest milestone for us recently, is crossing that million user threshold. Typically like 35 terabytes of data moves across the Helium network every day, and continues to grow. About 100,000 mobile hotspots now. So I think it's probably one of, if not the biggest network of its type in, at least in the United States. Yeah, and it's super cool to see it grow. And the benefit, I think, to people is that the hotspot operators get paid for this, right? Like if you are running a hotspot in a coffee shop or whatever, if 100,000 people come into that coffee shop and use it, and by the way, they use it by accident. Like if you're a subscriber of like AT&T or a bunch of other carriers that we work with, you automatically join the Helium network. It's not like in a hotel or on a plane or something where you have to like explicitly pick it and like say okay, in the portal screen. Like you just hop on and you hop off, just like you would a normal cellular network. And I think that's the important part of the magic. But at the end of the day, the hotspot operators get paid per gigabyte of data, and that is the benefit to them, right? Is that they are part of this like big ecosystem of money, basically, that they weren't able to get into before.
So you brought up AT&T, and T, and I mentioned them in the intro. So is that kind of the relationship that Helium has with both AT&T and T-Mobile? These carriers kind of want maybe a decentralized network where they can like tap into different internet providers locally, like community-owned internet?
Yeah, so we announced with AT&T recently. We're working with a bunch of other carriers as well that are not announced yet, and then we are working with a big company called Telefonica in
Mhm.
Mexico. But the deal basically there is that AT&T sees this problem that I was describing, right? Where they need coverage in more places and they don't always want to pay for it, right? Or they don't always want to pay a lot for it, let's say, in terms of like build out. And so they get to use the Helium network whenever it makes sense for them, right? And when it makes sense for them might be they have a tower in the area, but it's heavily congested at that time, or they have no coverage in that area, period, right? And then it's sort of a better option than they otherwise would have had. So AT&T pays us, we pay out the hotspot operators, is roughly or the network ends up paying out the hotspot operators. But that's kind of their desire, is really to like have better customer experiences, right? Like they don't want their customers to have bad connectivity wherever they are, and Helium is a very, very cost effective way for them to do that. And we've given them all kinds of tools where not only can they take advantage of the network where it is, they can also draw on a map where they would like coverage to be, right? And then the Helium community will look at that map and say, hey, if I go put a hotspot there, I'll probably make some money because that's a spot that AT&T is saying like, I actually need coverage in. So it's a really sort of interesting like decentralized network planning tool, basically, that allows them to like take advantage of this network without having to go through the cost and expense of and time of like having to build, little towers everywhere all the time, which is kind of the way they used to do it.
Yeah, I actually have a Helium mining router. I got it a few years ago. And I think from my perspective, so I live in New York City, my parents are out in Connecticut. And I was told at the time that New York City is so densely populated. There's so many helium routers here. You should just go put it out by your parents. You're more likely to do better than like competing with the other ones that are surrounded by you, right? So, do you think that is still a problem today, or is there things being done to alleviate that and like reward miners who buy and set up hotspots to earn even in densely populated areas? And then you brought up how like maybe AT&T wants you to like toss one out in the middle of like Oklahoma, where I bet there's not many of them. But compared to like New York City, for example.
Yeah, in the IoT days, we created a system called proof of coverage, which was this way of earning tokens before there was usage on the network, right? Like you kind of needed something to like spur active or like growth of the network before there were sensors to use it, and kind of similar to Bitcoin, right? Like you earn Bitcoin for mining blocks, and especially in the early days, like no one was using Bitcoin, right? Like so you were just earning Bitcoin for creating these blocks, and there was nothing in them.
Yeah.
Similar kind of concept in the mobile network, and so yes, in the IoT days with proof of coverage, you wanted to try and create as broad of a network as possible, and so the way proof of coverage worked was if an area was too dense, everyone involved in it would earn less, right? Like that was kind of the system there, is like to try and force people to spread out. In the mobile network, which we're sort of focused on currently, different problem, right? Like you don't really have like a density problem. You have a how do I get more hotspots into like dense locations, right? And because the range is so short, they could be buildings next to each other, right? Like you could be one coffee shop here and a yogurt shop
I should
next
bring
to
mine
it, a
back.
bookstore. You perhaps, yeah, and so you don't really have the same problem. The biggest problem you have is like, how do I get a hotspot into a place where there's lots of people? And so you see people in the community like negotiating with like building owners or like store owners or whatever, because they're all trying to get hotspots into like the most highly foot trafficked area, whether that's a gym or a coffee shop or whatever it is. So that's really the problem now, is like, how do I maximize like how many people use this rather than just sort of an arbitrary like geographical limit like we had in the past.
Right. And how many people do you think actually want to like truly own and earn on these hotspots? I imagine it's probably not for everyone. You have to have some like interest in like the tech world or, decentralized community owned things. What are the types of community members Helium's trying to target to expand this footprint?
Yeah, I don't think it's for everyone, certainly. I
Hmm.
think in the IoT days, you could make an argument it was, because you could literally just stick it anywhere. But now you really have to like be focused on, like I said, trying to get access to people and foot traffic. So I mean, usually I would say you see at least a couple of different people. Like one are like crypto enthusiasts who are just trying to mine everything, right? Right, and they typically mine multiple currencies. They might own multiple deep in devices. They might have a Helium hotspot and a Hive map or dash cam or whatever as well. So that's sort of one bucket. And then the other was not one that I totally expected to see, which was, in the past I called them like a telco anarchist, and I'm not sure if that's the best word, but like people that really just hate the status quo and would like to change it or like blow it up somehow. And those guys are usually quite passionate about it. They actually love the idea of like building a community owned network. And then, lastly, I think there's probably a group that's interested in like helping their communities out, and we've started to see more and more of that recently, where there may not be good internet coverage wherever they are, or they just see it as a way to like sort of uplift their community a little bit by earning more income, whatever it may be. But I think it's like those two or three groups, but it's a pretty broad spread, and I think probably different to most crypto protocols out there, where like they tend to like lean heavily into the crypto side or the trading side of crypto in particular rather than the usage side.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then not the hotspot side of things. I've actually seen some helium ads while walking around in Brooklyn, New York this past weekend. It was so funny because I was like, oh, I'm literally recording with this CEO on next week or whatever. And it shows like no mention of crypto, DPIN, Solana, etc., which I think is sometimes the smart move, because it's like appealing to normal audiences opposed to like throwing all these buzzwords in their faces. Can you kinda tell us, like, behind the decision behind this? It's like, "Hey, just come use this internet," Like, you don't even need to know how we did it on the back end, or how did you guys think about that?
Yeah, so Helium Mobile is the subscriber cell phone service that uses the Helium network.
And
It
this is
also
the ad
uses
I saw. Yes.
yeah, it also uses T-Mobile's network whenever you're not in range of Helium, so you end up with good coverage regardless of where you are. And we went through a few iterations to get to this place that you just described. Like at first, you did earn crypto. Like the first versions of the plans that we put out there, it's okay, right? Like you get a very specific type of user and that this is the problem I started to have with it was that you get people who aren't really using it because it's a good service. You're getting people who just want to earn more tokens. And that can be okay, but in my experience, I think the experience that we've had, and I think other DPINs are now having, they're very fickle users, right? Like as soon as their earnings aren't what they think they should be, or whatever happens, or the market goes down or up, or whatever happens, you get a lot of volatility because people aren't actually using it because it's a service that they want to use. They're just using it because they want to earn more crypto. And I think that was a decent way for us to start. Like we're obviously well known in the crypto space, and I think it was easy for us to reach that audience. But I think especially with something like a phone service, you want to go as broadly as possible. Um, and so rather than focus on crypto or Solana or DePIN or any of those words, it was more like what's an actual product that is uniquely enabled by crypto that people really want. And if it's a good enough product, I don't think you need to lean into the crypto part that much if it's under the hood. And so in the case of Helium Mobile, for example, like we have a completely free plan. And so in lieu of the user like earning crypto, like we earn the crypto. And the thing that we end up being able to hand off to normal people is like, here's a completely free cell phone plan that you can now go and use. And so far that seems to be working. That seems to be resonating better broadly than like at first we were the crypto carrier, and like we took this very crypto centric
Right.
language. And I think that worked pretty well, and it was novel and interesting to the crypto universe. But now, we're starting to see like broad success, like completely outside of crypto. And that's why you're starting to see ads in like, in subways in New York and stuff like that, is because we're really trying to reach an audience that really may have nothing to do with crypto.
Is it working? Have you noticed like
Se-
an uptick?
Seems to be working. I mean, the on the last look, people get mad when I say this kind of stuff, but we are outpacing AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile in terms of signups for prepaid plans.
Oh wow.
So it seems to be going very well. People, we typically have gotten anywhere from 1 to 5,000 signups per day, which are kind of massive numbers in the at least in the telco world.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, overall it seems to be going well. Like we're seeing success, and I think it's because it's a product that people actually want, and so you don't need to really dress it up with crypto necessarily. It's like, yes, I would like a free phone plan.
Yeah.
How you
I would like a free phone plan.
how you do that on the back end is kind of your problem. It is and it isn't. Like people are still highly skeptical, right? Like, are you selling my location data? Like, what do you do? Like, how does this work? So
Yeah.
I do think there's an explanation that you still have to come up with, but you're not leading with crypto. Like that's not the value
Yeah.
proposition.
And is there an explanation? Because I know it says like
There
no
is.
gimmicks, all that, and I'm like, I know
Yeah.
nothing in life is free, you know? So
No, it's exactly what I said. I mean, we
yeah.
it used to be that the crypto would go to the user directly,
And
and
now it goes to you guys. Mhm.
yeah, and in some cases that was better for the user, but again, I think it narrows your audience fairly significantly. Like as soon as you start having to have a wallet in your app, then you're like crossing into another domain. And I think in general, at least in my experience, the broad population still views crypto with like tremendous amount of skepticism. And so if you can, it might serve you to stay away from it depending on what your product does.
Mhm. Do you think the, free model is kinda like the future of where phone plans will go? Or this really only works with what Helium is doing?
I think over a long enough timeline, it's possible that you get there. Like I have a belief that the cost of connectivity over time will trend towards zero. Just because you're going to see more and more competition, things that look like Helium or Starlink or like whatever it is. There's a lot of new technologies that allow the cost of connectivity to get cheaper.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's possible that you start to see more and more operators like flirt with models like this. And it's not an uncommon model, right? Like Twitter uses it, like use it for free, but if you want more cool stuff, then you've got to start paying us. So the freemium model is not exactly novel. I just don't think there was an economic way of like really making it work. But in crypto and with Helium, it's different. Like and the main thing over time that helps us make this sustainable is that we want to try and create as much helium coverage where there are users as possible, right? So that when we pay T-Mobile, it is significantly more expensive than when we have to use helium. And so we would like more and more of our subscribers to use the helium network, and sort of creating that overlap, I think allows us to continue doing this over time, and make it sustainable, basically, where the cost of connectivity is significantly cheaper and, again, uniquely enabled by crypto.
Yeah. The thing I'm trying to wrap my mind around is that Helium works with AT&T and T-Mobile, but you're also competing with them? Is that a
Yeah, I
fair
try and wrap.
statement?
Yeah, I try and wrap my head around this too. I think there's sort of there's sort of two ends. I think Helium Mobile as a business is in some ways competing with every other cell phone carrier, right? Whether it's Mint Mobile or Boost or AT&T
Sure.
or whatever. We're all trying to get the same subscribers. On the other hand, like the Helium network is a service. It's sort of like a utility in some way, right? That we use, and now AT&T is using, and a bunch of other carriers are using. And I think that's the right model, right? Like the Helium network should just be available to everyone, and the more people that use it, the better. But yeah, Helium Mobile is definitely I would say the best way I could put it is, at a highly competitive space.
Yeah. Okay, so they're like siblings. So we got Helium Mobile and then Helium Network and then
Yes.
Helium.
Y- Helium is like the umbrella term for just
Yes.
anything related. But yeah, it's Helium.
Right.
The Helium network is there, and then Helium Mobile is the business that we run, that also uses the Helium network along with AT&T and others.
Got it. Okay. That's how we're separating it. Got
That's how I'm
it.
going to try and stick with it for now.
Perfect. On the front of 5G deployment, can you kind of explain how you think about that, the way it works, and like what is wrong about it today in the American market, maybe, or even globally?
So when 5G was first announced, like the original purpose of it was this ultra high frequency, high bandwidth type of connectivity. So it was called millimeter wave. And the point of that is you get like very low latency, super high bandwidth. And so you could do things like self-driving cars, or like autonomous robots or whatever, would need that kind of connectivity where it was super fast. The problem with it, this is again like physics, is that to do that, the range is like super limited. And we're talking about, like, if it was outside my window, it may not get in through the window. Like, that's how sensitive it is at that
Yeah.
frequency, at like, 50, 60 gigahertz. And so that idea never really went too far. Like, there are some millimeter wave deployments, like you sometimes will see them on your phone. They have like a little special logo when you're connected to them. But what ended up happening was, at least in my version of the story, is that they ended up dumbing down 5G quite significantly, so to the point where it kind of looks a lot more like LTE did.
Hmm.
They started using different words like mid-band and like all these other versions of 5G, but it still says 5G in the corner. And the reason was, it became clear that it was impossible to deploy the original vision of 5G broadly. Like, there was no way. You would need millions upon millions of those, microwave type devices, to get anything that looked like the coverage we have in LTE, and it just didn't seem possible, right? And then of course you had like people talking about the health issues with millimeter wave, and like it's going
Right.
to give you brain cancer or whatever, and so there was a lot of stuff working against it. And they ended up what I think of as, like, it's almost like 5G light almost, right? Like, it's slightly better than LTE, but it's still called 5G. But that sort of highlighted the problem, was like that to advance technology further and do what they really wanted, like, you needed so many devices in so many places that it was like impossible for a company to even think about doing it. And to me, that was like a good reminder that, like, yes, this sort of crowd distributed decentralized model is actually the better way of doing it, because you can get them everywhere, like, if everyone is going and doing it, right? Like, if people are deploying in their like local places, and it's not a top down operation, then you can get those kinds of devices in a lot of places, right? And so the original 5G millimeter wave stuff, to me, was like a good reminder that the current model doesn't work if you want it to like be significantly better than something like LTE. And LTE is fine for like a lot of applications, but as you start to see more applications like self-driving and like autonomy, as well as like more coverage indoors, it just becomes too hard to do that, with this top-down model. It's just too expensive.
Right. So then the focus is not on 5G, or the focus is on fixing it.
I would say it's mostly on fixing it. I mean, where we are today is we use a technology called Passpoint, which is based on Wi-Fi, actually. And our worldview is that we don't really care about the technology itself. Like, we don't care if it's 5G or 7G or Wi-Fi, or just doesn't matter
Care
that
if it
much. It's like,
works.
Yeah, it's like what do people need, right? And Wi-Fi has gotten so good. Um, and the other and Passpoint, which is the technology I kind of mentioned earlier, is the technology that allows you as an AT&T subscriber to like go into a coffee shop and end up on the Helium network without having to do anything. And Passpoint isn't a new technology, but it's only recently become popular. And so that kind of convergence of like Wi-Fi getting really, really good, Passpoint as a technology being adopted by all these major carriers, and frankly, the telcos struggling with deploying coverage in more areas means that yes, you can fix that problem. You may not be actually using 5G, like it may not be actual 5G cellular radios, but I'm not sure if anyone cares. Like if you walk into the coffee shop and you have excellent service and you've got like good download and upload speeds, like do you care how you did that? Probably not.
No, I just care that it worked.
That's right. And that's
100%.
so we try and take a pragmatic view of it and use whatever the best and most cost efficient way of doing it is.
Yeah. Do you think the incentive-based model is kinda the future? I know back in 2021 when I covered that funding round, you mentioned that, Helium has this belief that it's the future and that it empowers individuals to create this connectivity while owning it, rather than just contributing to the existing status quo. Do you still feel this way, or how would you kinda define the relationship and incentive-based model today?
Yeah, so very much still feel that way. And I think Helium has been, regardless what you might think of Helium, it has been a resounding success on that part, which is the idea of both creating an economic incentive for people to participate in the system, but also using crypto as a permissionless kind of orchestration tool for a bunch of people that you don't know, right? Like
Mhm,
you don't know who these people are, you don't have any kind of formal relationship with them, and crypto is like a perfect way to orchestrate all of that. You got a bunch of like untrusted parties basically that you need to figure out a way to distribute money to. Um, and I think crypto has worked beautifully for that, and the incentive system built into Helium has also worked beautifully for that. And now, what I think is very, very exciting for at least me to see is real demand forming on the other side. You now have a million actual users like touching the Helium network every single day, all of whom are paying for access to the network. Means there's actually real cash flow, going through the network that isn't just people speculating, right? And I think that is extremely new for crypto, right? It's not just traders, you're not just taking fees from people trading on crypto networks. Like these are actual normal humans that are using a useful service and paying you for it. And I
mhm.
think that is very exciting and also extremely new in the crypto world.
How long did it take to hit 1,000,000 users?
I mean, it ramped pretty fast. I mean, we only really started doing this. We call this part carrier offload, right? The part where AT&T and others are starting to use Helium. I think it's only really in the last year that this happened. So it kind of went from thousands of users to over a million, probably within 12 months, and probably most of that, honestly, within the last 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, and you start to get it starts to accelerate that way, right? And then more and more people start using it, and that causes more hotspots to start getting deployed because they
Mhm.
realize they can start getting paid. And so you end up in this, this flywheel basically that hopefully never really stops spinning.
So this is for the network, right? Helium network.
That's right. Yeah.
What's the end goal? How many millions of users are you hoping to hit? Let's say by the end of the year.
I mean, our goal for the year was to get over a million daily, so we're already there, and it's
So you
only
could just sit
June.
back.
So now we're on vacation now. I mean, I try not to have goals because they're always like completely wrong. At least
Targets.
too
You have goals.
precisely.
Yeah.
I go. Sorry. Go have some
You have
goals.
goals, maybe just like not targets. Yes. I got
Yes,
you.
I would. If we get to a couple of million at least, I would be pretty happy with that.
Mhm.
Um, and like I said, really what I'm focused on or what I really want to see more of is this overlap between like Helium Mobile subscribers and the Helium network. Like I'm like excited to see that because that's kind of the next stage, right? It's like one thing to go and like, sign up a bunch of users to Helium Mobile, which seems to be working well. The next is like, can you coordinate a universe of people to like create coverage for those subscribers? And again, that is super new and is a very Helium centric thing because if you think of even you might argue that Filecoin is a deep in network, and maybe it is, but it's different from Helium in the sense that Helium really depends on geography. Like you can't just have a bunch of hotspots in a warehouse. Like they have to be literally distributed
Yes.
all over the place. And that is like, again, another new problem to try and solve is like, do you have any ability to like direct that or not, or is it always going to be random? And that's kind of the experiment that we're on now, is like, that's part of why you see what you're seeing in New York, is like, can we focus coverage and subscribers in one place, and how well does that work?
Right. And how big is the Helium Mobile user base?
I think we crossed 250,000 total signups recently,
That's
which is
great.
pretty good. Yeah, feel pretty good about
These
that.
ads rolling out, everything. So it works. Ads work. Advertising
Seems to
works
be
for
working.
people. Yeah.
Uh, and like I said, we're adding, we're constantly like sort of experimenting with different ways of acquiring customers, and like different referral schemes, and like, different things.
Mhm.
Um, so, minimally we're seeing about 1,000 signups a day. So you would hope that we grow by at least 100,000 subs a quarter at least, but we obviously want it to be significantly more than that. And I think we're on track for that this year. So yeah, the goal is to like try and become one of the biggest, or the biggest carrier in the country.
Yeah. What other markets or opportunities do you wanna tap into on that front with the wireless carriers and the networks and the mobile and everything? Are there certain areas that you guys really haven't explored yet that you think would be interesting?
For a while, held the belief that helium may be more powerful outside the United States than it is in.
Hmm.
Even though I'm complaining about the fact that there's three carriers, there's still three carriers, right? Whereas
Right.
there are countries, many countries in the world, where there is like half a carrier, or no carriers, or like no
Right,
network
and they have to
coverage, or
use,
no
like, Starlink or
infrastructure.
something, yeah.
Yeah, Starlink's incredible, by the way, but
Yeah.
it's also a great complement to what we're doing, because you can't use Starlink indoors, for example, right? And so you need some way to like create coverage and networks in these countries that have none. The challenge is, how, again, like how thin do you want to spread yourself to some degree, right? Like, it's a massive undertaking for us to do what we're doing today. And so the way we've approached it so far is by working with partners. So you may have seen the news. So Telefonica is a giant, Spanish telecom company. They have a subsidiary called Movistar in Mexico. And so we did a deal with Movistar recently, very similar to what we're doing with AT&T, where all Movistar subscribers are now going to start using the Helium network in Mexico. And because of that, it's now caused a bunch of deployers in Mexico to like go buy hotspots and start putting them all over the country. But I don't think you can really do one without the other anymore. Like, I think the novelty factor of this approach is gone now. And so I don't think you can replicate what Helium did in, 2019 or 2020, where people just sort of excitedly built out a network. It's now known that like this is a thing, and people now want to see like, okay, well, who's using it, and like, how do I get the most users on it? The deployer landscape is very, very different. So I think you need partners, is basically what I'm saying there. And Telefonica in Mexico is a perfect partner for this. Like, they don't operate as very much with their own infrastructure. They pay AT&T and Telcel for that. They would like it to be cheaper. They would like alternatives. And so we came along and said there is an alternative. They didn't believe us for a while, so it took us, couple of years of pilots and trials and stuff to really convince them that this works. But now, as of I think September is the target, it's going to roll out to every Movistar subscriber in Mexico, which I think there's like 20 million subscribers in total or something there.
Yeah.
And so they'll all start using the Helium network. So that's the right way, I think, to expand. And we're talking to operators in lots of different countries to do the same kind of thing. But I would love to explore a more scalable way that depended less on us, right? Like right now, we're sort of sitting in the middle of these negotiations because they are very normal, like business deals, effectively. But I would love to start seeing this occur more organically in like other parts of the world, where we don't even necessarily need to touch it or even know that it's happening.
Yeah, I laughed before because you said, "Oh, it's taken a couple years," but it's not a joke. Like, it actually took you guys
Yeah.
that long,
Yeah.
right?
I think we had our first conversation with Telefonica almost 5 years ago.
Wow.
Y-
So these
y-
things
yeah.
don't
So
move quick. Or maybe does it
no.
compound over time where it's like now it's gonna accelerate because people could
I-
see the use cases with, other people that quote unquote took the chance with helium?
Yeah, I think that point you made there is exactly it, right? Like, no one wants to be the first idiot to like, it's like just decide if I do it, but
First
now other
smart
people,
person, yeah.
but now other people have like already taken the fun. Like, if you now see AT&T and Telefonica, and there'll be others announced shortly, you're no longer that worried about it, right? Like,
Right.
whoever you are, like, you've already seen two of the largest global telcos already like publicly make these statements, so you can no longer be that nothing terrible can happen in the scheme of it relative to what you might have in your head. So I think that matters a lot. And it's the same on the Helium Mobile side, by the way. It's like very much a social proof thing. People are very skeptical of, even if it's free, they're still terribly skeptical of it. And you need this sort of compounding effect of like, oh yeah, my friend has it, or he knows someone that's used it and it works great. And then all of a sudden, like everyone is comfortable with doing it. And so I think it's exactly the same on the business side as well.
Yeah. I have Verizon, so I could just, like, turn it off and then switch over to Helium.
Yeah, what are you doing? You know all about Helium, and you're still using
I know,
Verizon?
right? Is there a referral code we
Well,
could give out to our listeners?
yeah, they're absolutely. I don't want to give anyone mine because it doesn't seem fair, but yet everyone can refer anyone, and and you earn some money when you do that. But yes, you should not be on Verizon
Yeah.
anymore.
No more Verizon after this
No,
episode. We're
that,
changing it.
that's right.
Seems like, there's a lot of growth for you, Amir, with, maybe these dominoes falling, it'll open up the opportunities for, more providers to start using Helium. What would you say is on the roadmap for the future? Like, near term, long-term plan?
I mean, near term, we have a lot of other carrier relationships that I hope will start to become public soon. Like it's a very slow and painful process, like working your way through these marketing departments sometimes. But that's all happen. So I think those are kind of the obvious things that you'll see. We are very focused on trying to grow the Helium Mobile subscriber base as huge as possible. And again, trying to like do exactly what I described, like get more Helium Mobile users using Helium. So overall, like daily active users on Helium, we would hope to go up to ideally a couple million at least before the end of the year. Um, and then I think crossing into the crypto universe, we've had a lot of discussions about new tokenomic systems that I think are interesting, like given all the things that we've learned over the last 5 or 6 years, all the changes that, the SEC and sort of the regulatory environment towards crypto seems to be much more friendly now, which I think gives us and others in the space the opportunity to like explore models that we wanted to explore in the past that were impossible. So we're spending some time on that as well. Like I think there's some interesting things that hopefully you'll start to see us talk about in that world soon. But really, just sort of a relentless focus on growth. I think one thing that you get trained for in crypto is like the need for always like new announcements, like an amazing thing is coming, and it isn't really like that a lot of the times building businesses, like it's a steady grind until eventually you get to sort of market fit and then things start to take off. And I think we're starting to see that with us on both the subscriber and the network side. But there's definitely less sort of like major announcements and a lot more just like, business going well. So I'm excited for all of that though. I think it's a very, 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 very big space. There aren't that many industries measured in like the trillions of dollars of TAM, and we are in one of them. And so I think it's super exciting, and I'm excited to see like the growth and the steady sort of pace that we've had over the years.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm excited to keep an eye on it for another 4, 8, 12, whatever years ahead. Amir, last thing, can you leave us with a piece of advice, something that you've carried with you throughout your time? I guess running Helium.
I was just talking about this with someone else earlier today. Hire curious people. They were like, what is your most important like hiring thing?" And I just said they just should be curious about stuff, And I think if I were to have learned one thing about hiring over the years, it would be that is that you want people that have this sort of natural curiosity about how things could be better or different. And I think if you sort of surround yourself with a lot of those people, you end up building some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Amazing.
And obviously, the other advice is get off whatever carrier you're on and switch to
I can
switch
get on Helium. Yeah, there we go.
switch to Helium Mobile.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure. Look forward to seeing it grow.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.